Hello, everyone. It's Phil Jones, and joining me is Phil Boyle. So, Phil, how are you?
I'm good, Phil. Excited to be here.
I just got back from InfoCom, and if you're not familiar with InfoCom, InfoCom is the pro show where all of the professional integrators, IT support people, they all go to see what's the latest when it comes to display technologies, audio technology. So guys that are doing large concerts or doing like 75 classrooms or large venue stuff like maybe large amphitheaters go to this particular show. And the one thing that I noticed at this show, Phil, is there has been some dramatic increases when it comes to the efficiency of light sources that are found in these projectors. For example, Panasonic was showing a 40,000 anti-lumen unit, which was about the same size as a 15,000 anti-lumen projector that I reviewed a couple of years ago. The reason why I bring this up is these massive improvements in the brightness and light sources that are found on these pro units. Think of them almost like a Formula One or a Top Fuel dragster. As they develop these things, what they learn, what Epson and some of these projector companies learn, is trickling down into the consumer market. So if you look, there've been some giant jumps in brightness this year. So for example, Epson's showing 40,000 lumen professional projectors, but now they're also selling consumer projectors that are 10,000 lumens. That would, back in a couple of years ago, was $80,000. You can get one now for 30. So this massive amount of brightness is starting to appear in consumer projectors. So the question I have for you, Phil, and what we're going to talk about today, is how much brightness do you really need in order to get a great HDR picture at home? So you've had some opportunities to review some pretty bright projectors lately. How do you think the brightness has really impacted the HDR picture quality?
Well, I think at a certain point, having a brighter projector is always great, but at a certain point, those high brightness projectors, when you're watching things where you're trying to get really great HDR with great contrast and black levels, your brightness is being tamped down anyway. So it's nice to have it when you need it. Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. But I don't think you need 40,000 to 1 or 40,000, lumens of brightness to have a really good looking HDR picture. But hey, you tell me, you were there and you saw them. So I'm curious, how much do you need, Phil?
So the best thing is, I'm glad you brought that up, Phil. There's three things you need to have a good HDR picture. The first one is good black levels are important. Now, absolute inky blacks is not the number one thing, I don't believe, when it comes to HDR. It's important, right? It's a three-legged stool. The next one is good on-screen brightness, good amount of clean, bright, accurate output, right? Bright greenish picture is not what we're talking about. You want great black levels and you want high brightness with high color accuracy. And the last thing you need is very good or very efficient tone mapping, right? So the reason why I say that is when you go to a movie theater, movies that are mastered in HDR for movie theaters are a special file made specifically for that type of projector in that movie theater by the studio. You can't have that. You can't buy that. What you're getting is something that was mastered for an incredibly bright flat panel display that can deliver 1,000 nits of brightness, 2,000 nits of brightness, 4,000 nits of brightness. Heck, some HDR content can be mastered at 10,000 nits of brightness. A projector can barely do, a lot of projectors can barely do 100 to 150 nits. And I'm sorry, trying to fit 4,000 nits of 0 to 4,000 nits of contrast and brightness into 0 to 150 isn't going to cut it. It isn't going to look the same. And tone mapping makes it better, but it doesn't take you all the way there. So what we're talking about is how many nits do you need? How much brightness do you need that comes off of the screen? So so a lot of times it goes, well, I don't need a 10,000 lumen projector. I don't need a 5,000 lumen projector. It depends. And that depends on the size of the screen that you are using.
Lumens is the total amount of light a projector emits toward the screen,
Right.
while nits is how much light is reflected off the screen surface toward the viewer.
And the
Right.
reason why I bring this up is I review a lot of projectors in my lab. Like, for example, I really, really, really like this Sony. It's 2200 lumens. And on my 100-inch screen in this lab, it looks spectacular. And that is because if I measured the light coming off of my screen from that projector, my matte white screen, I'm getting over 200 nits, probably 220, 230 off of that screen for HDR. That looks good, right? However, if I take this and I took it to my office, and in my corporate office, we have a 185-inch screen. If I projected 2200 lumens on a 185-inch screen, I'm probably getting about 100, and that's not going to cut it in HDR.
Right.
It's enough for SDR, but it's not going to cut it for HDR. So the how much lumens you need is based on the screen size you're using. Epson is saying 300 nits of on-screen brightness. I'm saying that when I've noticed that when you exceed 200, that's when HDR starts to look really, really, really good.
So, Phil, why do you believe that 200 or above is good? 200 nits or above is good?
It's interesting. I was sitting around talking with Rob Brennan, and I was always wondering, why do these projectors look so good in my lab when I measure 200-ish, right? But then when I put them on a bigger screen, they don't look as good. And what he mentioned was, if you look at a piece of content, say it's a piece of content that's mastered for a flat panel, and that flat panel is 65 inches, right? And 65 inches and 1,000 nits master piece of content. That is a certain amount of on-screen brightness that will come. That's the square. If you took the square footage of the screen and the amount of light coming off of it, think it like a flashlight, right? How much light is coming out into the room and hitting your eyes? If I take that screen and I make it 130 inches, it is 4 times bigger, right? So if I want the same amount of brightness in a screen that's 4 times bigger, I only need 1/4 of the brightness. So 250 on a 130-inch screen will give your eyes the same perceived brightness, on-screen brightness, as 1,000 nits on a 65-inch screen. So as the screen gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, you don't need as much on-screen brightness. But I've noticed that's why they're saying 300, because they think that 300 looks really good. And I've noticed the 200 nits range is where it really, really starts to look good. So if I was going to buy a projector now, I don't care if it's a ultra short throw, a standard throw, DLP, LCOS, it doesn't matter. What I would do is I would look at the size of screen I want, and then I would try to pick a projector that can deliver at least 200 nits of brightness on that screen if I really want decent HDR, plus good black level and good tone mapping. And the big thing is, when I'm talking about this 200 nits of on-screen brightness, we're talking about HDR has this huge range of brightness from the blacks to the highlights, right? When I say 200 nits of brightness, you're using the maximum. The 200 nits is used for the brightest highlights, right? So what ends up happening is, say you have something that is 200 nits, 300 nits, 200 nits of brightness. And so 0 to 200. So 0 is the black that you can get, and 200 is going to be that bright sun or that bright dot in the sky, right? The majority of the content lives in here. right? So say the average frame level is about, when I have 200 nits of peak brightness, the average frame level, which is all the majority of the skin, like your skin tone, Phil, would be 75 or 50. Mine would be, 45, right? If I take the brightness and make that 100, now the brightest thing is 100. The black is still 0, but now your skin tone, the average frame level of the image, your face, my face, instead of being 45, is now 25. So it looks dark, right? Now, what I could do is I can try to tone map it to try to bring your brightness, your face up, and my face up, but then all of the details, those other steps above where our skin tone is, will start. You have to compress it more and more and more and more, and it loses a lot of its vibrancy. So we're not saying that 200 nits of just the middle of the screen. We're talking that 200 nits, that 300 nits is to ensure that you have really the bright highlight looks good, but all of that middle range will look a lot better because it requires a lot less aggressive tone mapping.
A lot of people are going to be unhappy because they're going to want to now get a new projector and start having that conversation with their significant other about why they need a new projector.
Yeah. The quickest way to see it, if you have a projector and you're running it on 150 inches and you think it looks really, really good, for a week, zoom it down to 120 and watch that HDR on 120 or 130, and then zoom it back to 150, and you're going to be like, what happened? So if you don't believe me, that's a quick way to do it. Take your content, take your favorite thing. Like one of my favorite movies right now is the latest Mad Max Furiosa. Zoom in on that, run that at 60 or 70% of the size you normally run it at, and then zoom it back out and watch that movie again, and it will not look the same. It just won't. The silver won't look the same. The colors won't look the same. The flames and explosions just won't look the same. Black levels stay the same. The only difference between the two is the brightness has changed. And so that's the quickest way to see this in real life.
Because, we talk about it a lot in our reviews anyway, that HDR is really hard to do on a projector. So having that extra brightness, that's going to improve the overall quality of the HDR image. So, yeah.
Substantially.
Whether you need 40,000 lumens of brightness in a home, no, you don't, because you're not. No, you won't need that. Giant screens.
Yeah, you won't need that. But if you're someone that's looking at a 180 or 200 inch screen, 10,000 makes it look like HDR. 2,000 makes it look like a projector playing SDR. And that's just the fact of it is. Because the more brightness you have, when you combine the higher brightness with the deeper black levels, it means you can utilize less aggressive tone mapping. If you apply too aggressive tone mapping, two things are going to happen. Number one, it's going to look flat and lifeless, or you're making an HDR to SDR adapter. So all you're doing is knocking it down so much that you get a very good SDR picture, not an HDR picture. But if you want to show all the shadow details and all the highlights with 110 nits of brightness on screen or 150 nits of brightness on screen, the colors are going to look flat and not like the director intended for you to see. So the best way to say it is, if you have a good flat panel TV and you fire up a Blu-ray or a Kaleidoscope or a piece of content on that display, that is what the creator wanted you to see. That is what it was mastered at. If it does not have that color vibrancy, that level of perceived on-screen brightness, it isn't correct. And in order to achieve that, you need more brightness.
So what you're talking about here is projectors coming that are going to rival flat panel televisions as far as brightness goes.
As long as they maintain the black levels too, because you don't want to give up all your blacks like you said. But as we bump these brightnesses and the imagers become more efficient, you'll be able to maintain good black level. And as the brightness gets higher, I would rather have 15,000 to 1 or 8,000 to 1 native contrast with higher brightness for HDR than 100,000 to 1 with 100 nits of brightness and absolute great black level. It's not going to look good as for HDR. And people will fight with me forever, but I've noticed that when you hit that 200 nit mark or above, that's when it starts to look like HDR on the projector.
Right. And now what you're saying, based on what you saw, is projectors that can actually do that are coming.
Well, if you think about it, Phil, you just reviewed the Little Nebula, right? And that Nebula put out 3,500 lumens conservatively with good color. A few years ago, a home cinema projector would cost you $20,000 to do that with decent native contrast, right? 3,500 lumens on a 130-inch screen far exceeds 200 nits of brightness, which is why you're looking at that picture in your theater going, and in your space going, wow, that picture looks good, because you got the black level, but then you have the brightness, because they always say colors appear more saturated when they are displayed at brighter luminances. So that's why when you're looking at that Nebula at 3,500, you go, wow, this is probably one of the best looking projectors I've seen, because it's got good tone mapping. It's got good black level, which you mentioned, and it's got enough brightness to actually light up HDR to make it look like HDR, which is why you looked at that projector and said, holy cow, that thing looks great. So you're seeing it yourself.
You're right. You're right. So then where's this going?
Where this is going, I hope, is more manufacturers are going to start increasing the quality of their bright light while maintaining the black level. We're starting to see better DLP imagers and lenses and stuff like that are raising the native contrast of DLP projectors to over 5,000 to 1. In fact, I just saw the Hisense LQ9 at InfoCom, and it is rated for 5,000 lumens with 5,000 to 1 native contrast. That's not counting any dynamic dimming or anything like that. There's several other DLP projectors that are coming in that price point. I'm just waiting for the Sonys and JVCs. Now, of course, it's a lot harder to do with an LCOS because how the light goes through the LCOS projector, it isn't the most efficient way. Does great black levels, but it's really hard to get high brightnesses. So I'm hoping that there will be a breakthrough, because I would love to have JVC level native contrast or Sony native contrast at 10,000 anti-lumens without it costing $80,000. But I will tell you that for many people, try to get as much brightness on your screen as possible. And guess what? If you can't afford to get a super high brightness projector, you're probably going to be better off going a little smaller on your screen if you wanted to make it look good for HDR.
But correct me if I'm wrong. It's not just brightness. I mean, I think you said it earlier here. It's not just brightness. It's about being able to have things like an aperture, right? A dynamic aperture. It's about being able to have a better responding image processor. You and I were having a conversation a few months ago about this next generation of DLP controllers that are coming in this year's projectors, may even be out in certain models, that are allowing them to respond much quicker, which means that they're utilizing the light better, which means that everything gets better, including the black level. So I think it's a little, I don't want to say misleading to say how much brightness do you need. It's how much of an improvement in brightness do you need when you've also made these other technological advancements?
Okay.
Right?
Okay, so the best way to think of it is this way. If we were talking about a car analogy, right? 0 to 60, right?
Right.
you want your car to be able to go to 0 to 60, not 0 to 50, not 0 to 30. 0 is important because you need to stop, but you also need to go to at least 60, right? And that's the biggest problem is people get so caught up on how deep the black level is. Because if I reduce the black level by, I go from 1 nit of on-screen brightness for black to half a nit in brightness, I double the contrast ratio on the projector. But I am telling you that I would rather go, when it comes to HDR, you're going to get a much better picture if you double the contrast by doubling the brightness versus cutting the black level from 1 nit to half a nit, or cutting the black level from a half a nit to 0.25. The measurements will be the same. The contrast ratio will be the same, but that doubling of brightness is going to make the HDR look better. So yes, there is a baseline of black level that you want. You don't want it to be gray and washed out, but chasing blacks because blacks are better, almost like an OLED. Oh my God, I got to have OLED level blacks. And because of that, it's going to make, it doesn't matter that it's not that bright. When it comes to HDR, it's a fallacy. SDR, yes, you'll need 100 nits for HDR. For SDR, you need 100 nits. That's all you need. Most projectors can do that. So now chase the blacks.
Right.
When we talk about SDR, you got to have more brightness, right? Good brightness. And that's the balance. And that's where I hope we're going. And if you're an HDR fanatic and you want HDR to look good on your projector, yes, find a projector that has good native contrast, but make sure it has enough brightness to display at least 200 nits on your screen.
So would I be out of line to say that 3,000 ANSI lumens becomes the seller, the lowest level that you should expect?
It depends on your screen size. If, like I said, the
for
one I have back here,
120-inch screen?
For a 120-inch screen, 130. After 130, you need about 3,000. We're gonna put a chart in to this one, and I'm gonna put in on a matte white screen on 100 inches, how much brightness do I need to hit 200? On a 130-inch screen, how much brightness do I need to hit 200? On a 150-inch screen, how much brightness do I need to hit 200? And on something like a 180-inch screen, how much brightness do I need to hit 200? Now, I'm not saying that your HDR is going to absolutely be completely unwatchable if you try to use, 22 or 2,500 ANSI lumens on a 150 or 160-inch screen. But when you see higher brightness side by side for that,
right,
the difference is shocking. And the problem is most people don't get a chance to see them A/B. I did that. I will put an image in there of those two projectors, and all I did was take a piece of paper and block the image from each of the projectors. You will notice, because you can see the couches, I did not adjust the camera whatsoever, so you'll see that the couches are the same color. And what you're seeing is pretty much what it looked like between the two in that room relative when it comes to color. And the difference was shocking between the two. It didn't mean the other one looked bad. We looked at that picture for a year and everybody thought it looked great. I thought it looked great. But when I fired up the higher lumens projector on the HDR, I was like, wow, what happened? I thought the unit was broken. I had to adjust it. And I was like, no, it's 100% power. I was just used to seeing that, but this is what it should look like. And with the higher brightness, it looked like a 160, 180-inch flat panel TV, not a 180-inch projector, a 180-inch flat panel TV, which is what I was saying when it came to HDR. SDR, they both look great. HDR, the higher brightness made a big difference.
Let me just say, I think part of it is, a lot of this is opinion, right? And I don't have a ton of data to back it up, but I kind of believe that, if you want to get a good HDR picture, if you're really looking to get the most out of Dolby Vision or the most out of HDR10 plus content, right? you really need to have no less than 2,500 ANSI lumens, 2,500 lumens, right? And really, you should give yourself a little bit of a margin for error. So where I was going before is I really think that 3,000 ANSI lumens of brightness, or I'm sorry, I keep saying ANSI, 3,000 lumens of brightness is really going to become the new starting point.
Yeah, I can say that. And I can say,
but I don't have any hard data to back that up. I just have my experience and my opinion, right?
Well, I can agree with you, because I like this BRAVIA 7, and the difference between a BRAVIA 7 and a BRAVIA 9 is about $20,000, and the main difference between the two are motorized lenses and a 50% bump in brightness. And when you see it in person, you get it, and you go, why would anybody do that? It's like 50% more brightness with this black level. And you go, right. Oh my gosh, look at what the HDR looks like now. So, Phil, as I stressed, and you stressed too, we're not saying crappy black levels are okay. We're not saying bad video processing is okay. We're saying it's a three-legged stool. Great black levels, great tone mapping, and quality light results in better HDR. All right, so that's it for me, Phil. Thank you for coming and hanging out with us again. And as I mentioned, if you have any questions or you have any comments, put them in the chat. And if you like these types of videos, please make sure you like and subscribe so I can justify doing more of these videos with Phil in the future. So take care, everyone, and we will talk to you soon.